Over the course of history, large public companies have reported major operational or financial setbacks that have been revealed to be frauds. And true enough, fraud and theft don't appear out of thin air. So, what were the largest financial frauds ever perpetrated? In this video, I will tell you about the 11 largest frauds ever recorded in history. Fraud scandals have been around for as long as humans have been able to cheat each other, but they've never been more high profile than they are today. The largest fraud scandals in history have changed the way we think about corruption, crime, and punishment. In this video, if you promise to watch until the end, I will tell you the largest frauds ever recorded in history, as well as the reason why you might be worried about another financial crisis coming. Without further ado, here are the 11 largest frauds and scandals in history. Number 11. John Law. Make way for the true master of deception. John Law was a Scottish economist and financier who is remembered for his role in the Mississippi Company bubble in France in the early 18th century. Law was the founder and controller of the company, which was granted a monopoly on trade in the Louisiana Territory in North America. The company's shares became wildly popular and their value soared, leading to speculation and financial excess. However, the bubble eventually burst and the company's shares plummeted in value, leading to financial ruin for many investors. Law fled France and was forced to live in exile for several years before returning and eventually dying in poverty. The episode is considered to be one of the first recorded financial bubbles and serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of speculation and financial excess. Number 10. Charles Ponzi. Ever wonder where the words Ponzi scheme come from? I'm going to tell you now. Charles Ponzi was an Italian businessman and con artist who became infamous for his Ponzi scheme, a fraudulent investment scheme that promised high returns to investors. Ponzi convinced investors to give him money, which he claimed he would use to purchase postal coupons at a discount and then sell them at a higher price. He promised investors returns of 50% or more within 45 days and initially paid out returns to earlier investors using the money from new investors. However, the scheme was unsustainable and eventually collapsed, resulting in significant financial losses for many investors. Ponzi fled the country to avoid prosecution and later became an advisor to Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. His scheme is considered to be one of the first and most famous. Keep watching because later I'll show you the right way of going out of business. Number 9. Victor Lustig. Get out of the way, wannabes. Victor Lustig is coming through. Victor Lustig was a con artist who is known for several scams, including one in which he pretended to have the authority to sell the Eiffel Tower in Paris to scrap metal dealers. Lustig reportedly approached 2 different buyers, each of whom paid him a large sum of money as a bribe in the hope of securing the contract to dismantle and sell the famous monument. However, Lustig did not actually have the authority to sell the Eiffel Tower and the scam was uncovered. Lustig fled to the United States where he continued to engage in fraudulent activities before being arrested and imprisoned. Number 8. Ivar Kruger. If you have an amazing life, what more could you ever ask for? Well, you'll ask for everything if the things you have are based on fraud. Ivar Kruger was a Swedish businessman and financier who is known for his role in a financial scandal that took place in the early 1930s. Kruger was the owner of a conglomerate of companies that operated in various industries including banking, film, telecommunications, and transportation. He is also known for his efforts to create a monopoly on the production and distribution of safety matches. However, Kruger's empire was based on fraudulent financial practices, including the manipulation of financial statements to appear more profitable than they actually were. This scheme collapsed during the Great Depression and Kruger committed suicide in 1932 after it was revealed that he had defrauded investors of hundreds of millions of dollars. Number 7. Ivan Boesky. Oh, Wall Street. Who hasn't heard of this before? I know you have. But have you ever heard of Ivan Boesky? Ivan Boesky was a Wall Street financier who was involved in an insider trading scandal in the 1980s. Boesky made illegal profits by trading on insider information about corporate takeovers and other business deals. He was eventually caught and charged with securities fraud. As part of a plea bargain, he agreed to pay a fine of $100 million and to serve a prison sentence of 3 years, of which he served 2. The case against Bosky was part of a larger investigation into insider trading on Wall Street that led to the convictions of several other individuals. Bosky's story was later portrayed in the film Wall Street, in which he was portrayed by actor Michael Douglas. Number 6. Whitaker Wright. So, tell me, is there a right way of going out of business? Take it from me, there is. Whitaker Wright was a British businessman and financier who was involved in a fraudulent scheme that took place in the early 20th century. Wright owned several companies and used his connections to recruit prominent members of society as directors, hoping that they would invest in his businesses without carefully examining the financial details. However, Wright was not a competent businessman and his companies were not successful. He engaged in financial fraud to try to cover up the problems, but his scheme was eventually uncovered and caused a panic on the London Stock Exchange. Wright was found guilty of fraud in 1904 and committed suicide before he could be arrested and imprisoned. Number 5. Charles Keating. Do you know the reason why we have government regulation in financial institutions right now? I'll give you the answer in 2 words: Charles Keating. Charles Keating was a businessman who was involved in a financial scandal known as the savings and loan crisis of the 1980s. Keating operated a company called Lincoln Savings and Loan Association, which was one of many savings and loan institutions that were created to provide home financing for consumers. These institutions were similar to banks, but were not subject to the same regulations. Keating and other savings and loan executives engaged in fraudulent activities such as using the money that was deposited by customers for their own personal gain rather than investing it in high-quality assets as promised. The Lincoln Savings and Loan Association collapsed, causing significant financial losses for customers and costing the government billions of dollars in bailouts. Keating was convicted of fraud and served prison time for his role in the scandal. Number 4. Jeffrey Skilling and Kenneth Lay. If there's one thing we know about the world, it's that at the end of the day, you'll always know who the frauds are. Jeffrey Skilling and Kenneth Lay were the CEO and chairman, respectively, of Enron, an American energy company that was involved in a major accounting scandal in the early 2000s. Enron was one of the largest and most successful companies in the world with more than 20,000 employees and annual revenues of over $100 billion. However, the company's financial success was based on fraudulent accounting practices that involved hiding debt and manipulating financial statements. When the extent of the fraud was revealed, the company's stock price plummeted and it filed for bankruptcy, making it the largest corporate bankruptcy in American history at the time. The scandal also led to the downfall of the accounting firm Arthur Andersen, which was found guilty of obstruction of justice for its role in the fraud. Number 3. WorldCom. WorldCom was a telecommunications company that was involved in a major accounting scandal in the early 2000s. The company filed for bankruptcy in 2002 after it was revealed that it had engaged in fraudulent accounting practices to inflate its revenues and hide debt. The scandal was one of the largest accounting frauds in history, involving over $100 billion in assets. The company's CEO, Bernard Ebbers, was convicted of fraud and other crimes in connection with the scandal and was sentenced to 25 years in prison. WorldCom agreed to pay a settlement of $6.1 billion to resolve a shareholder lawsuit, which was the second largest settlement of its kind since 1995. Number 2. Bernie Madoff. Ponzi scheme and Wall Street. Did these words ring a bell to you? Aha! Are we talking about Bernie Madoff? Madoff was a financier who was convicted of running a Ponzi scheme, a fraudulent investment scheme in which returns are paid to early investors using the money from new investors. Madoff's Ponzi scheme was uncovered in 2008 at the height of the global financial crisis. The scheme was one of the largest financial frauds in history, involving billions of dollars of investor funds. Madoff admitted to running the scheme and was sentenced to prison. Many people, including some of the financial industry, have claimed that they suspected Madoff's fund was a scam, but he was able to operate it for many years before being caught. The Madoff scandal was significant because it affected many wealthy and powerful individuals, as well as investment banks and other financial institutions. Number 1. Lehman Brothers. Here's a fraud you might want to look into. The question is, are we going to have a financial crisis again? Lehman Brothers was an investment bank that filed for bankruptcy in September 2008 during the global financial crisis. The crisis was sparked in part by the collapse of the housing market, which was fueled by the sales of risky mortgage-backed securities by financial institutions such as Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns. Lehman Brothers had become heavily invested in these securities and was essentially operating as a real estate hedge fund disguised as an investment bank. When the U.S. government refused to provide a bailout, Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy, which had significant consequences for the global economy. The crisis led to the implementation of new financial regulations, but some of these regulations have since been rolled back, raising concerns about the potential for future financial crises. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.